Hello, hello, my dear audience. It's Kristina here, and today is a new episode of KSM Podcast, Going Business Online with Kristina. And today I'm super, super excited to have my very, very special guest speaker, Nate Littlewood. Nate, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Christina. Great to be here, and I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you for joining, and I really appreciate your time and your energy to join this episode today. And Nate, tell us a little bit about you, who you are, what you do, and where are you based?
Sure. So I'm a fractional CFO, and I work with founders of brands, basically e-commerce and consumer products brands. So fractional means that I kind of spread my time across a number of different companies. All of the businesses that I work with are all relatively early stage, right? So none of them really have a need for a full-time CFO just yet. So I give a little bit of my time every week to my various clients, and I basically help them with finance and strategy sort of stuff. I have been at this for a couple of years now. Immediately prior to this, I was the lead mentor for an accelerator program located here in New York City, where I'm based. Did that for a year or two, which sort of began as I was winding up my time at my previous company, which was a e-commerce business. So I launched my own e-com company in about 2017, in a co-founder and CEO capacity. So all up, I've had, I guess, about a decade experience now in and around the e-commerce space. And for roughly a decade before that, I had a global career working on Wall Street at an investment bank. So that was where I kind of, learned about the world of finance. It was somewhat different to the startups and small businesses that I'm focused on today, but I got to learn the world of finance pretty well through there, plus a decade or so working in e-commerce and consumer goods. And really, what I'm doing now as a fractional CFO is kind of the overlap of those two worlds. So bringing that Wall Street finance expertise and helping small business owners understand their numbers better.
And Nate, you have such a long career in finances, and your journey is really incredible. And as you mentioned, that your background was in Wall Street and was working there, so you're also very, very engaged and very experienced. I mean, so that's pretty good. And before you started your first company, which you said 2017. You
Hmm.
mentioned that.
Yeah.
What triggered you to start that company, for example? And
Mm.
I'm going. We will talk about also fractional uh,
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
CFO, but just for our audience, maybe just to get to know more about it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's, I guess, a few layers to that question. Before we get to why did I start this specific company, I think the first question is why did I leave what I was doing before, which was working on Wall Street. And um, I guess candidly, the whole Wall Street thing, looking back, is something that I kind of fell into, didn't really understand what I was getting into at the time. But oh my God, did the time go quickly? And I was getting paid really well. I was getting sent all over the world to do it. And, I kind of blinked and, nearly a decade had gone by. But I think, reflecting back on that period now, in the back of my head, I kind of knew for a large part of that stint that it wasn't really where I wanted to be, wasn't really that well aligned with my, personal values and mission statement. But I just, never really had the time and mental space to go and explore what else was out there. The transition into the world of entrepreneurship really began for me when I moved to New York City. Prior to that, I lived in Australia and Canada, and quite frankly, the educational system that I'd grown up in entrepreneurship and small business wasn't even on the menu. Like I actually have a dual degree in engineering and commerce or business, and there weren't even any startup or entrepreneurial electives on the menu when I went to school. So it wasn't until I'd spent a couple of years in New York and had really had my eyes opened up to the world of startups and entrepreneurships that I became, aware of it and, started to give it some serious thought as a career path. But the more I learned about it, I was like, wait a sec, there's a job where you can solve interesting problems all the time. You get to build stuff. Like there's constantly new things to learn and challenge you. I was like, hell yeah, like I should have been doing this all along. This sounds freaking awesome. So that, I guess, is how I became interested in the world of entrepreneurship. How I arrived at my previous business called Urban Leaf was really by stripping back and erasing every career decision that I'd made up until that point, and doing a lot of introspection and thinking about the things and fields that I was genuinely interested in. So what happened is I decided to leave the world of finance, became interested in entrepreneurship. So obviously, I need somewhere to aim, right? I need a problem to go and explore and a customer to try and serve. So the way I went about doing that is I thought, what are some of my true passions and interests in life? And some of the stuff that came up immediately for me was food. Like I love cooking, I love food, I love food culture. I've done cooking lessons in probably 20 different countries now. So I love everything about food and food culture. I'm also a fairly outdoorsy sort of person. I love nature, biking, camping, hiking, being out in the forest, is kind of a special place for me. And I've always had a deep appreciation and respect for the natural world. And so that kind of led me into an interest in, the environment and sustainability type topics. The third piece for me was technology. And this, I guess, stems from being an engineer and frankly, a little bit of a nerd at heart. So I basically overlapped food, sustainability, and technology and started basically exploring the intersection of those three areas. And, kicked around a lot of different ideas, explored a lot of different business models. But it was through that process that I basically arrived at what became Urban Leaf, which was a e-commerce business focused on building, designing, and developing kits and accessories for growing food in urban environments. So we had a range of products for growing things like microgreens, mushrooms, mini fruit and veg. We had grow lights, hydroponic supplies, all that sort of stuff.
It's very interesting, and when you mentioned how you grew up and like schooling and everything, it was different than I want to say that you were in corporate job and then
Yeah.
started your own business journey. And how,
hmm
just maybe for our listeners, that transition, how did you feel in that time? As you said, okay, I like food, I like nature, I like
Mm.
hiking, whatever, and
Mm.
you connect everything in one place,
hmm
space
hmm
for you. And how it was in that, as you said, I didn't know about uh, entrepreneurship, so that's very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. The way I describe that era of my life is with an analogy that involves basically starting off the top of a very big grassy hill where there was lots of food, there was luscious green grass, it was amazing, as plenty to eat. That was kind of my world on Wall Street, finance. It was a comfortable place and there was plenty to eat. The process of leaving that and deciding to go do something else was like jumping off a cliff. It was absolutely freaking terrifying at first. I was kind of launched myself off this cliff into a world unknown. I was hurtling towards the ground at hundreds of miles an hour. I could see the ground approaching me. I was like, this is freaking terrifying. And, there were times when I actually, well, I felt ill from it. It was, just scary. But what happened after a little while is that my parachute opened. And when my parachute opened, suddenly I stopped looking down at the ground and being terrified of falling. And was able to find time to kind of look up at the horizon. And the more I looked up and around, I was like, oh, wow, look at that. Cool. Wow, there's some cool stuff over here. And all of a sudden, I was just, navigating around and discovering all of these, worlds and industries and opportunities and jobs and problems that needed, someone to work on them and solve that I'd just been oblivious to before. Like I just had no awareness of them because I was just so head down, focused on, doing what I had been doing for a decade at that point, that I really hadn't spent a lot of time exploring what was out there. I mean, it sounds a little bit silly now to say that, but if I can be honest with you, Christina, that's kind of what happened. So, the process was initially very, very scary, but once I started to understand just how many opportunities that were out there, it became incredibly exciting and, just fun to go and explore these different areas and things that I hadn't really looked at previously.
And you must be so thankful to your parachute, which was
Yes. Yeah,
open.
absolutely.
And I think that it was momentum, like in that time, that when opening that, you saw many opportunities for, like as you said,
Yes.
for something new, you need to step up, step forward, and see opportunities. And sometimes people
Hmm.
don't see that, all their life they say, okay, and they talk about in past. We
Mm.
live in this present moment. And by the way, I want also to share with you and with the audience, English is my second language, and I really like English. And I started like, especially with people, entrepreneurs in Australia, and I
Hmm.
was running team for the web and graphic design, etc. But I have never thinking about. Uh, I have never thought that I'm going to be a host, because I was so shy in front of the camera, and I was doing challenge
Mm.
with my mentor from Australia. We were running one Facebook group, and I have done 21-day challenges. It was challenge, and I got created videos and start hosted for ladies. And for me, in that was the way I didn't see that opportunity. And she always asked, Kristina, why don't you pop up in the group? Why don't you go live? And I was like, okay, I was like in backend. She was like a front man.
Mm.
But in that time, and now this podcast is like a top 20, 4 years, it's top 20 in category of online business by FeedSpot. And I have never thinking about that I'm going to do something like this. And I'm super happy with it. Either that English is my second language. So that's something which I didn't see, but it was opportunity. And now I
Yeah.
can host entrepreneurs globally, which is
Yeah.
incredible for me. And
Yeah.
just wanted
That's
to
really
share
cool.
with you my experience in some way for
That's a
the,
really cool story. It's
yeah.
it's certainly amazing the growth and evolution that we are capable of when we put ourselves into situations that are a little bit uncomfortable. Which for you, it sounds like, being on camera and podcasting is not something that maybe comes naturally to you. And it's also not something that really comes out naturally to me either. If you if you'd told a, 10 or 15-year-old version of myself that you're going to be a guest on a podcast one day, I probably would have been absolutely terrified. Yet
You
here
say,
we
what the
are.
freaking thing? I'm going to be a guest. And also, you're also host. You also have
Yeah,
your podcast, so we will talk about a little bit later about it. Yeah,
sure.
it's incredible. And yes, and this is when people need to see opportunities. Sometimes we don't see
Mm,
that, maybe
hmm.
because we don't believe in ourselves. And when you mention that, it's so, I always say, never give up. Just try,
Hmm.
never give up,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
move. If you don't
Yep.
try, you have never know how it's going to be. Because when we take
Yeah.
action, opportunities are opening. I mean,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's pretty good. And your
Very well
experience
said.
is amazing. Your experience is really amazing for the audience that you can impact some other people to open their
Yeah.
eyes and start their own business journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I enjoyed it. Certainly rewarding work. I love I have a huge amount of respect for entrepreneurs and small business owners. Partly, candidly, because I've been one and I know how damn hard it is. But also because my perspective of entrepreneurs is that they are the people in our world or our society who are not only, bold enough to recognize that, some part of the status quo is broken, right? Something we have here isn't working properly, and, maybe there's a better way of doing it. But they're also the people who are brave enough to actually move forward and actually have a go at fixing it. They're not just spotting the problems and saying, hey, we can do better, but they're saying, and I'm going to have a go at building that better future version than what we have now. And, just from a societal impact, I just think we all have to, have some level of respect and appreciation for entrepreneurs because they're the ones who are trying to build, better versions of everything that we have today. And, as our life progresses and the services and products and everything else that we have access to, they're there because entrepreneurs built them. And, I think they're pretty special people. So I count myself grateful to be able to work with people like that for a job.
Yeah, yeah, I agree 100% with you. And thankful to technology, this is such a beauty of working in online space. I mean, because
Mm,
if we don't have that, we can never connect and have you on on the podcast today on episode. So
yeah,
that is the beauty
exactly.
about communities and connections and what we do to help people to open their eyes and give them courage to move forward in some
Yeah,
way,
yeah, indeed.
sharing our stories and everything. So that's
Yeah, well
beauty.
said. Well said.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, and before you mentioned you were running your company and everything, and then how did you start with that fractional
Hmm.
uh, F,
Yep.
FCO, like is gonna, and also, can you share with us what is it? It's so popular. I heard about it. With
Hmm.
get there were other guest speakers who spoke about, but
Yeah.
it's a very popular model, business model,
Hmm.
and can you share with us how, yeah, you mentioned that you were in finance and also, and now can you share with us what is the core of that business and how do you help
Hmm.
people in terms of e-commerce and your maybe work with startups? I don't know. Can you
Yeah.
share with us about it? Maybe for some audience, maybe you will impact some of listeners,
Hmm.
maybe they will connect with you to talk about it and be just like
Yeah.
FCO.
Yep. Indeed. Indeed. Yeah. So I guess first and foremost, it's worth stating that I didn't get into this because I always saw it as where I was going to end up. I'm also not here because I felt like I was exceptionally qualified to be doing what I'm doing. Truthfully, over the last couple of years, I have dealt with a huge amount of imposter syndrome around doing what I do because, transparently, I've never been a CFO for anyone in my life. So there've been a lot of times over the last couple of years where I've kind of, looked at myself and asked, like, who the heck are you to be providing CFO services to other business owners? Like, you've never been a CFO for anyone before. What are you doing? But I guess there's a few pieces to this. So number one, I became interested in coaching and mentoring and working with other founders really through the work I'd done with the Accelerator program. That was my first ever experience, mentoring and working with other founders. And candidly, I initially went into it for I thought it would be a good working opportunity to meet other people in the startup world and, just see what happened in terms of networking. Luckily for me, what happened is it went really, really well. They liked having me around. I got more and more responsibility. I enjoyed being there, and I found myself, much to my surprise, really enjoying the work. So that for me was kind of the light globe moment where I was like, huh, I've never really thought about coaching or mentoring before, but like maybe there's something here. Anyway, in terms of how I got focused on being a fractional CFO specifically, I basically, the way I put it to people is I essentially Venn diagrammed my way into this by saying, look, I understand finance. Understand the world of finance better than most people. I've spent nearly a decade of my life working on Wall Street. And I also understand startups and e-commerce and consumer products. Like I've been the founder of one of these companies. Like I have an intimate knowledge of what it's like to be stressed about payroll next month. I know the options that exist for, in financing your next purchase order or inventory. Like they're all problems and situations that I dealt with personally. So it was really an interesting coaching and mentoring, overlapping my experience with finance and small business ownership that kind of led me here. Now, one thing I say to a lot of people is that I'm not really very typical for a CFO. Like I'm not an accountant. I'm not the guy who's going to be doing, hardcore deep dive, tax optimization, and I'm certainly not a compliance oriented CFO. What I do and what I specialize in, though, is working with founders who are basically crossing the chasm in the phase between post product market fit and being a real scalable, fully built out entity. So what I mean by that is that most of the companies and founders that come looking for me, they've got a business, they've got an idea, they've usually been up and running for at least a couple of years, and we've gotten to the point where, we're at or we've proven out product market fit or PMF. That said, none of the clients I work with have got a full organizational chart built out, right? So they're all, figuring out what to do about their marketing team. Should it be in-house or should they work with an agency? They're all figuring out operations and supply chain. They all need to build out SOPs and standardized ways of doing things and figure out the systems. So I really enjoy working that in that gap between, a founder with a cool idea and a few people and getting them to the stage where this is a real scalable business with a full team and, the proper systems in place. I enjoy that because I'm kind of a, founder and entrepreneurial mindset at heart myself. And I like the diversity of problems that get encountered there. The I guess, you know, zoom in a little bit further, there's two common problems that people usually come to me with. Number one is frustration around financial outcomes. So the founder's been working on their business for a few years, but there's some aspect of the financial outcome that they're not particularly satisfied with. And this could be materializing for them in the form of they're not able to pay themselves enough. Maybe they're not paying themselves consistently because they're prioritizing other things for their cash flow. Or maybe they're doing all this work, generating all this revenue, but there's never anything left in the bank at the end of each month. And they're sitting there thinking like, what the hell's the point of all this? Why am I working so hard if there's no, profits and cash accumulating in the bank account? So that would be category one. And I work with those people to just understand their finances and basically help them achieve whatever financial goals that they might have. The other category of people is folks who are, shall we say, overwhelmed by options and shiny objects. So during my onboarding process, I go through a process where I basically ask founders about and tease out of them, what are your priorities at the moment? Like, what are the things that you want to do in the business? And I'll usually hear things like, hey, I want to open up TikTok shop, or I want to, sell more on Amazon, or I've got this new product line, or I've got this agency that I want to hire. Oh, and I've got a CRO project I need to get working on. Anyway, by the time we've been through this process, these people have usually shared a list of 20 or 30 different priorities that they have. And at some point during this conversation, I have to turn around to them and say, listen, I'm sorry, but when you tell me that you have 20 or 30 priorities, what I'm really hearing is that you actually have none. And we need to figure out which of these things are really going to move the needle for you. Because there's a very good chance that 80 or 90% of the stuff that you're spending your time on is ineffective and is really not doing much to move you in the right direction. So I've got a number of processes and frameworks that I use to basically help founders figure out what are the two or three high leverage growth priorities that they need to be focused on if they want to grow their business and move things in the right direction. Happy to spend a little bit more, time on that if you wanted to and share the frameworks with you. But that's broadly what I do and how I help people.
Yeah, yeah, it's and what you said about you is you're very authentic, fractional. CFO, and because you do that in your own way, because
Hmm.
of your experience, as you mentioned, and from your experience, how can I resonate with this is that you just as you said different things like that people don't know they have I want this and that how and
Hmm.
your job is just to help them to overcome and see what is really true or they work too much and they don't have money in their bank account and this is very
Yeah.
very interesting because you and this is something what you do I can say from your heart because as
Hmm.
as your authentic one from your experience and how you do that on your own journey on your own way so that's very interesting
Yeah.
point.
Well, I've tried, I recognize that I'm not the, typical CFO,
Yeah,
and
I
I've
want to say
tried.
that you're not typical. Yeah,
Yeah, I've
that's
tried to develop a brand and a product and offering and a service that is unique to me and what I do. I sometimes actually wonder if I should maybe rebrand myself as a co-founder on demand. Because if I kind of look at how I interact with a lot of my clients, that's kind of what I am. Like they come to me with their biggest problems and the most difficult decisions they have, whether it's about, opening up a new sales channel or hiring a person or product or, which of these things that they need to focus on. And the role that I play is I bring the numbers and the finances and the data to those conversations. A lot of founders are very brand driven or product driven or purpose driven, but they often make a lot of their decisions on, gut instinct or intuition. And that can work to a point. But like the bigger these businesses get and the more complicated the decisions become, the harder and harder it is to rely on just intuition and gut instinct alone. And, when the stakes get higher and higher and the dollar signs get bigger and bigger, it helps to have a proper finance numbers backed, perspective on this stuff. So my job is to basically rock up and, tell founders what the finances and the numbers say or which directions it's pointing them and help them, leverage that perspective to make better decisions about how to grow their business.
yeah and I would like also to ask you what does co-founder on demand mean?
Co-founder on demand really means that I am addressing co-founder level topics, right? So most of my clients are solo founders. They have some, maybe a marketing person, they might have a virtual assistant, they might have a few other people in the company that are helping them out. But they often don't have anyone else in the company that they really feel is their peer or someone who's, kind of at their level at the C-suite type level. And honestly, a lot of the time it's just, these people just want or need an adult who has a level head and can give them some good advice to talk through things. Like someone who understands their business, understand how it works, understand how it does or doesn't make money, is aware of where the problems are, and they just want to have a rational conversation about what to do and how to solve, whatever problem it is that they're dealing with. So that's a big part of what I do for and with these people. And I don't know if the co-founder on demand title is going to catch on, but something that I came up with, and we'll see how it goes, I guess.
Interesting. Yeah, and and who are mostly your clients in terms of industries? Like you
Yeah,
work with brands also, and I would love also maybe to share with us some strategies, what you wanted to share it or stress out what you
yeah,
mentioned, but maybe much more to approach the audience, like a core of
yeah.
your how you work their problems you mentioned also, but yeah. Let's share with us a little bit about your who are mostly what industries are in
Yeah.
your area of you help
Yep.
them.
So my clients are all seven-figure e-commerce and consumer products founders. In terms of the industries represented, I have a couple of food-related companies, a pasta company, a baking supplies company. I have a few homewares and lighting type brands. Um, I have a women's femtech brand that sells products in, Walgreens and CVS and places like that. And just recently signed on a new golfing apparel brand that sells like golf shirts, golf clothing, and golfing accessories. I'd say the areas where I've spent the most time would be food products, and homewares. Furniture, homewares, home goods, that sort of stuff.
And when you work with those people, what is
Hmm.
like a difference between them, like a profile of those
Mm.
business owner? Like because as you mentioned, food
Yep.
mostly in that
Hmm.
industry, and then like maybe can you share with us something specific when you work with them, or how are so good for collaboration, or their approach to the business, or
Yeah.
something like that?
I think the best way to answer that or address that question is to tell you who they're not. So what I mean by
Yeah,
that
of course.
is is that there's
However,
from my perspective, there's broadly three different categories or profiles of founders that I encounter in the ecom space. Category one is the creative founder. They're, product led. They might be a subject matter expert. They understand, the product. They like building things. They like making things, and they're, kind of the product or brandy sort of founder. Quite honestly, they don't always make great clients for me. And it's often difficult to get them to really engage with the finance and strategy related topics. Some of them can, but a lot of them are just so preoccupied with product and making widgets and selling things that they often, they're just not the sort of personality who has the aptitude and the interest and the willingness to really engage with someone like me in a meaningful way. And no disrespect to them, like some of them can get by just fine without someone like me, and if that's the case, kudos to them. But I have maybe one client who I'd put in that category, and I guess the relationship works for that type of founder if they have enough interest to be able to, dive into the finance stuff periodically. And also if there's a fairly high level of trust and respect, and they can say, listen, Nate, just give me the high level. I'm going to trust and, have faith in you that you can handle all this stuff and you'll tell me the important bits when I need to know them. Fine. I can work with founders like that. The second type of founder, I refer to them as the kind of paid media gurus, right? So these are people who understand Meta, they understand Google Ads, they understand, customer acquisition, and maybe they're from an agency background or maybe they're just self-taught, I don't know, but like they understand the business of, pay-per-click media. And these people have often got fairly simple businesses. In my experience, they usually have much, much simpler product catalogs compared to the creator profiles. And a lot of them, are quite content as long as they understand the math around, CAC and LTV or customer acquisition cost and lifetime value. Like if they understand those concepts and understand, what numbers need to match up and so forth, they're often just happy continuing to run their media account and run their ads and basically have a bookkeeper or accountant kind of follow them around and clean up their mess. And for a lot of these businesses, it's very simple and clear where they're going to get their money from. Like the next dollar is going to come from selling product, and they know that they're going to do it profitably. And when they get that money from the customer, they know what they're going to do with it. They're going to buy more inventory and more ads, right? It's not that complicated. And these people don't make great clients for me because they have fairly simple businesses and, not a lot of complication there to really deal with. The third category a founder, and this is where most of my clients reside, is what I'd call the, more rounded out business owner archetype. So these are people who are not necessarily strong in any one discipline of business ownership, but they've been around a few years. They've been in running this company for long enough to have had some big mistakes and failures. They realize that, hey, this finance and numbers stuff is a bit more complicated than what I thought, and they've experienced some pain as a result of that. And, they're much more pragmatic. And it's not like they're wedded to product or wedded to marketing or wedded to sales as something that they want to focus their time on. But they're like, hey, I'm just going to do whatever's needed here in order to move the business in the right direction. I just need help from someone to tell me what that direction is and how do I do it. So in my experience, they're usually the best type of founders for someone like me to work with, just because they're most receptive to, my offer and the sort of service that I provide. It was a bit of a roundabout answer, Christina. Did that address your
Yeah,
question?
thank you so very much because for my previous guest speakers also, you just shared something about founders and
Hmm.
because that's maybe for audience, they maybe some of from audience who will listen to this episode can recognize themselves in some category of
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
So that's maybe that they can think about are they in the right way to do it or and thank you for sharing
Yeah.
that. Yeah, it's quite totally answered my question and much more because as experienced CFO, so that's great. Thank you for sharing that. And I didn't ask you, do you work with startups?
Yes. So all of my clients are, I guess,
Can
what
you
you'd call
share some
startup.
experience about the startups? Maybe for some people who wanted to start and have business idea, maybe just about that. If you can share a little bit about those companies.
Yeah, well, all of my clients I would consider startups. They're usually, a few years old. My founders are usually managing teams of, 2 to 10 people. And so, they've all got a small team that they're trying to manage and figure out how to allocate these people to the various problems and projects and priorities that they have popping up. In terms of talking about startups, it's a pretty broad topic. Is there a particular area of startups you want me to
Yeah,
zoom
what
in
you
on?
wanted to share from your experience, maybe that you can stress whatever you want. Like, what do you think that what you wanted to share that will be interesting for our audience today?
Wow. That's a very big question.
Yeah, it's a big question, but when people just they have an idea,
Hmm.
they start with that, and then maybe they can sell startup also. Is that
Hmm.
correct in some way? And they have some founders, some investors who wanted to invest in that or something like that, maybe for
Yeah.
whatever you
Well,
wanted to share it. It's a big topic, I know. But
sure.
from your experience, what
Yeah,
do you
yeah,
think about startups and maybe this, as I said, this episode maybe can impact some listeners to start their maybe they're
yeah.
in phase to do something to start their own
Hmm.
business journey. They have business idea, but they didn't know how to start or something like that.
Okay, okay. Cool. Well, let me talk a little bit about the different phases that we might go through here. So,
Thank you.
at the very,
That's
very
perfect. Thank you.
at
Thank you.
at the very, very beginning, I think it's important to understand which there's kind of 2 categories that any startup business would fall into, and it's important to understand which of these you are. One would be a founder who has a very specific solution and perhaps a problem that they want to solve. So, I've invented this widget or this device or this product or software technology, whatever, and it solve this problem. If you are this type of founder, then what you're going to be doing is basically figuring out which type of customer is most feels the pain associated with that problem most strongly. In other words, who is most likely to be the buyer of your solution? right? Whether it's a podcasting technology or a water bottle or a Peloton bike, like all of these products or services are things that solve problems for people. And if you've already settled on what your solution is going to be, then your job is to figure out which customer is going to pay the most because they experience the most amount of pain for that problem. The other type of founder or the other direction that we could go is founders who are a bit more ambivalent about the solution that they're solving, but they're very, very drawn to a particular type of customer, right? So they might say, "Hey, I specifically want to work with, female athletes who are, experiencing sporting injuries, for example." I don't know where I came up with that example, but, they feel very, very passionately about a certain type of customer or a certain type of person. For me, my customer and the person that I look forward to serving is startup founders. I think they're great. I love hanging out with startup founders and I love supporting them. So, the other approach here is to start with your customer and then spend enough time with them, get inside their head to understand the problems that they face and what are the things that they are struggling with. Then you work downstream into the solution. So one is kind of starting with the solution and working backwards towards the customer. The other starting with the customer and working downstream into the solution. So they're fundamentally like the two different ways that any, startup business can go. Once we've got the point where we have a customer, a product and a solution, then we're potentially ready to, spend some time on this. And this has the potential to become a business. Becoming a business or becoming a company has in it the expectation or requirement that at some point a profit is going to be generated here. There will be economic value created out of delivering this product or service. If you are never going to prioritize profitability and creation of economic value, then I would argue that this should never be a company. This might be a hobby. This might be a non-profit. This might be a club. There's a lot of other ways that people can organize around common interests and spend time on certain activities. But if we do not have as part of the goal generating a profit, then this should not be a company. When it comes to the relationship with finances, and I guess the next couple of phases after that is we've determined the customer problem and solution. We've determined that this is going to be a company. Then we go through a process which is known as basically finding product market fit. And this is essentially figuring out how to not only sell a product to a customer, but also do so profitably and ideally do it in a scalable way. And once we get to the point where we've getting some traction here and we can scale, starting to see scalability and repeatability in our ability to find and sell to these customers, then we're making our way or making progress through this phase called product market fit. Until you have figured out product market fit, you should spend absolutely nothing with someone like me. Until you've gotten to that point, all of your time, your financial resources, and whatever other stuff you have access to, like everything should be invested into figuring out product market fit. That means listening to the customers. It means doing marketing experiments, doing sales experiments, testing out new sales channels, testing out everything you need to test. Like all of your available time and resources should go into doing that. There is no amount of financial wizardry that I or any other CFO can do to fix a product that nobody wants to buy. If real customers in the real world are not willing to buy your product and do so at scale, I can't help you. But once we've gotten to the point where we've proven that out, then the decisions that you have to make start to get a lot more complicated. You're going to be facing decisions about, okay, do I diversify my product catalog? Are there more widgets I can sell? Do I expand into different geographies? Do I increase capacity? Do I hire people to help me? Do I open up new sales channels to meet my customers in different places? And each of these decisions has got, different risks and rewards associated with it. They all cost money or time or perhaps both, but they also each offer different upside in terms of the earnings benefit or returns that we could generate from these things. So as we get post-product market fit and we start, realizing that there's more and more options or more possible directions for our business, that's when someone like me potentially becomes valuable to you because I can help you evaluate all of those options and understand like which ones make the most sense for you and your business. Was that close to what you were looking for,
Yes,
or?
yes, of course, because you're so experienced with that and you work with startups. And I think that your explanation and your experience, what you said about the startups, because such a big topic, it's such a big, just to share. But
Mm,
this is, as you mentioned, if you have a product which no one which people don't want to buy it,
mhm,
that this is not going to be your client because just not. And dear audience, if you have product which no one wanted to buy and one, so don't connect. So you know what Nate said. He said that you need to have a product which people wanted to buy, and he can work with you. That's that's true.
indeed, indeed, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, and you just Cheryl, like I don't say that it's so complicated, but it's such a big topic as I mentioned a bit again, and yeah, but what you said and shared is really huge and really understandable. So
Hmm.
and when you mentioned about the product and everything. And when we do something as startup, if we don't have client, this is like a hobby. Either that we
Hmm.
can spend our time and energy and everything, but also
Hmm.
when we need to research new market, we also need to put energy and money. Is that correct?
Hmm. Hmm.
To research new market for our product or service or
Yep.
software or course or whatever. I mean,
Yep.
in terms of startups.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. I mean, every startup is basically an exercise in figuring out how to generate profit before your access to time and money runs out. The
Mhm.
time might come from, your savings or, stipend or salary that you have available to you. But most startup founders are getting paid significantly less than what they could get if they had a full-time job working for someone else. And, most founders can't afford to do that indefinitely. Like at some point, we have to say, hey, like, I need to be making more money in this because I have certain life expenses. I've got to pay my mortgage and my kids and whatever. And there's a time investment that we're making here. The other type of investment that we may have is a financial investment. It could come from yourself, family, friends, could come from an angel investor or a venture capitalist or type investor. There's a lot of places that we could get money from, but basically what we're doing when we are attempting to grow, launch and scale a startup business is we're investing the time, we're investing the money, and we're trying to do it in a smart way so that we can generate some type of profit or future economic wealth. And basically you keep going until the time and or money run out. Hopefully you figured out how to solve real problems for real customers, and if you have, then they will start paying you something to solve their problems for them. And what you're trying to do is basically take the income from selling solutions to people's problems and use that to then grow the business, right? When you break it down, that's essentially all any company is doing. It's really that simple.
And what would be your advice
Hmm.
for entrepreneurs, future entrepreneurs, or maybe who wanted to run startup?
My advice is that it's a lot easier to build a business in a spreadsheet than it is in real life. And
And
if you are going to
what is the
spend,
meaning by that? How can
well,
you
what I mean by
explain?
that is
Maybe there are
that
people who don't understand that.
what I mean by that is that you can put some of the key assumptions and inputs about your business into a spreadsheet very, very quickly. Heck, it's 2026. You can probably do this in a few minutes with Claude if you wanted to. But, map out your volumes, map out your pricing, map out the, commissions that you might have to pay someone, map out the cost of goods sold, figure out what the overheads are going to be in terms of staff and storage and rent and legal and accounting and everything else. And, if you're somewhat, spreadsheet savvy, like there's free templates on the internet. It's not that hard to find a template or guide to get you started. If you're not a spreadsheet numbers sort of person, then just go on Upwork or find a fractional person to help you put together a very, very basic model. You can get this done in like a day or two, right? But you have no idea how many founders get into business and, spend years of their life building these companies only to then realize that the numbers don't work, right? And when you're 2 or 3 years in, you've already launched a product. And at that point, you realize that the price and the cost of goods sold and the overheads and so forth, it doesn't make economic sense. You're too late at that point. I actually, one of my clients is dealing with a version of this at the moment. It's a business that has won fairly broad retail distribution, which basically means they're working with a food distributor and they have a lot of placements in retail stores across the US. The problem is that they're not making money on, this particular distributor and this type of retailer arrangement. And there's really nothing that they can do about it, right? The cost of goods sold has been optimized. They are not going to be able to raise price with this, particular channel, given the level of competition that they have. And we're now going through the process of figuring out how to get them out of about $2 or $3 million worth a year of sales through this particular channel because it's unprofitable. They're not making money, and the prospects of them making money in this channel are incredibly slim. But this founder had spent multiple years of his life like building out this part of the business, and something that I've been helping him with over the last year or so is, pointing out that he's not making money out of it. He wasn't going to make money out of it, and that he needs to get himself out of there. And, that's an example of a problem that we could have seen if we just put the correct numbers into a spreadsheet years ago. And yeah, before you go and dedicate years of your life building an actual company, take a day or two to build it in a spreadsheet first, and just make sure that you're comfortable with the outcomes that you're aiming for and what's on offer here before you sign up for it.
And dear audience, you're going to know now what is about spreadsheet and why is important to put in spreadsheet. Just don't to spend years of hard work and everything, and now just going to be like your client that you cannot earn money, and you put your energy and effort and time and years and life and everything
Mm,
to do something like that. That's sometimes
yeah.
it's sounds sad, to be honest, because if
Mm.
and you cannot do and you couldn't do something to, but yeah. And Nate, you also you can help people. You are helping startups when they wanted to start business. Is that correct?
Not really a
Or maybe
pure,
they're in phase of existing
yeah.
startups and you can help them to move forward.
Yeah, so I usually get involved when businesses are doing at least a couple of $1 million a year. Beyond that, it's usually not a little bit too early for me. The fees that I have combined with, what they need and their ability to afford it is usually not a great fit. There are exceptions. My smallest ever client was doing about $500,000 in revenue, but she had phenomenal margins and was just insanely profitable, partly, a function of the niche that she was in. And so, yeah, she was making plenty of money and, could afford to work with someone like me. But usually, most of my clients are doing at least a couple of $1 million a year.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I have many questions for you today, but and I would like also to ask you about your podcast. Can you share with
Hmm.
us who do you mostly host? Maybe your
Hmm.
clients, or I didn't research too much, to be honest, but you're here to
Hmm.
share with us about your podcast. What is the name of your
Sure.
podcast, and how people can find you also on YouTube channel, I believe so. And
Yep. So my podcast is called Profits on Purpose, which is an intentional pun, which alludes to two things. Number one, that founders and business owners can, if they want to, be intentional about the profitability of their company rather than have it be, something that may or may not appear while they're focusing on other things. Like they can intentionally, take actions and think about running their business away in a way that, purposefully generates profits. The other perspective that I like to explore on the show is the intersection and tension that often exists between purpose-led entrepreneurship and the finance world. I particularly like working with purpose-led founders and, they have a mission, whether it's environmental, social, health, whatever it is, and that's amazing. But often purpose-led founders have to have some, difficult interactions with the sobering world of finance and business. And the reality is that sometimes compromises have to be made to the purpose in order to generate the profits. And the profits are essential if you want to have a sustainable business, right? You can have the best mission in the world and you can donate all this money to charity and you can help homeless people and you can do all these amazing things. But like, if you're not profitable, then you're not going to be financially sustainable long term. So all of these good intentions that you may have will become irrelevant if the business is not sustainable. So yeah, that's broadly speaking the type of topic that I like to explore. Most of the guests on my podcast are founders of eComm and CPG businesses. Um, and yeah, we just explore their unique journeys and the ups and downs of their life as entrepreneurs.
thank you for sharing that. And I will put all links below this episode. So, Nate, how listeners can connect with you, and please share with us your website. So I will put
Hmm.
all links, as I said, but sometimes people like to listen, maybe just to hear.
Sure.
Sometimes they don't have time to read everything in description mode, but also just to share with us and your social media pages, profile, and where how listeners can connect with you.
Of course. So the best place to get, or best places to get hold of me is firstly LinkedIn. I'm most active there, posting most days. My name again is Nate Littlewood. Fairly easy to find on there. The other place you could go to track me down is the website, which is futurereadycfo.com, which is all one word. I think there's a contact us form, but you can check out some testimonials, learn more about my products and services there. And yeah,
And also it's your website, your podcast also is on your website. I mean,
correct. Yeah,
uh,
yeah. There's a section there for
so for
the
all you,
podcast.
because you host founders, and so that's a pretty good place for listeners to hear some of your episodes, because it's a little
Yes.
bit different where what of my podcast, what I
Hmm.
do. But yeah, that this is going to be such a good experience and challenge for most of listeners of this episode.
I hope so. Yeah.
And before we ramp up our show today, it's such a
Mm.
big pleasure to host you and to talk to you today. What will be some like a final message for our listeners, and future business owners who wanted to start their own
Yeah.
business journey, or they wanted to run startup, or they're in existing business, or maybe they wanted to shift
Yeah.
something, or they
Hmm.
have some missing links with money, with
Yeah.
finance, etc.
Yeah. So the one piece of advice I would give is to figure out how to develop a productive and healthy relationship with your finances. If you can do that, you will, over time, come to recognize and appreciate your finances as a strategic ally that makes decisions easier for you. It makes your job less stressful as a founder. It makes it a lot clearer in terms of the things that you should or should not be focused on. If you don't feel like you can get there alone, then ask for help. There's plenty of people out there who will be willing to consult or coach or support you. But don't go down the path of having a denial or avoidance type relationship with your finances. I know it's complicated sometimes. I know there's a lot, it can feel overwhelming, but no successful business was ever built on a founder, owner, or operator who had a denial relationship with finances and, refused to interact with them. That is not the path to achieving your financial goals. So that would be the one piece of advice I'd give folks.
Nate, thank you so very much. And for all your listeners who wanted to start or in business and have startups or whatever, or need some kind of advice, or please connect with Nate and he will help you. Just start with some connection. Uh,
Yeah,
Thanks again. It has been such a pleasure having you today, and I learned a
likewise.
lot from you. And I think that we will have again some episodes to talk about. There are many different topics from especially finance.
Hmm.
And I'm so excited to have you today. And thank you for being here, and thank you for joining. And it has been such a pleasure to host you today.
Thanks so much, Christina. I really appreciate it. And thank you very much for having me on your show.
Thank you so much and have a lovely day, whatever, and a lot of success in your life and business. And Nate, see you again in my show, I think this year again. We'll
Okay.
see you again in the show. Thank you so much. Bye for now.